Hello all, and welcome to my review of Cobra Kai Season 6, Episode 2. This episode is entitled Something Something Dark Side. Just kidding, I don't remember the name of this episode, and I have to say full spoilers for this episode, and I have to make a confession as well. I watched this episode this morning, and I do not remember precisely everything about it, but I remember the main things, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, interesting thing in this episode, I guess we're having a John Kreese side quest where he goes and he cuts the head off of a snake. A little bit strange, but okay. I guess I'll take it. This season's going in a strange direction. We've got 13 more episodes to go. Doesn't that feel so good to have a season with so many episodes? Doesn't that just feel good? Anyway, we've got so many more episodes to go. We're not even going to finish the season until next year. It's going to be really interesting. But Cobra Kai, Season 2, no, that's not right. Season 6, Episode 2. We've also got something going on in this episode, which is sort of the kids and the adults both making peace in this episode. I like Johnny Lawrence in this episode, sort of learning to take the moral high ground, and I like the fact that he didn't beat up that real estate guy. I like that kind of almost got him a deal, and then that didn't really work out, so he wanted to get a real job. Him starting to work at Miyagi-Do kind of works. It's a little bit rushed. Although I will say him as well working there, you can see his people skills there, but it's like, since when does Johnny Lawrence have people skills? I guess you could say he's learned from Daniel there, but it doesn't really seem like that's the kind of job he would be good at. I think they should lean more into his strengths as far as him being direct. And stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of what they were going for. Oh, he's just very direct. But does that translate to being a car salesman? I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, I think that's a good development. It just gives me warm feelings to see them getting together, even if it doesn't really make sense. Like, for example, Chosen being the voice for Miyagi-Do. Like, dude, weren't you like 2 episodes just picking a fight with Silver for no reason? Going to Silver's house to take him down? That's not Miyagi-Do, that's striking first. That's basically trying to out Cobra Kai. I mean, so that's a little bit strange. But you know what? I'll take it. I mean, I guess they kind of had the episode where they were assimilating more into Miyagi-Do, so I guess that makes more sense. And honestly, really, that stuff, the writing there, it is a little bit choppy, but it doesn't really bother me. I like to see that stuff. There was one thing in this episode that I thought was very irresponsible. And, this is kind of a recurring pattern with Cobra Kai. I've seen several things in Cobra Kai that I thought were a little bit irresponsible with what they're teaching kids. Because the Karate Kid original film, it was a kid who had to defend himself at a tournament, not going out and picking fights with people, not striking first, but learning to defend himself and to stick up for himself in a karate tournament. That's what that was about. It was about standing up to bullies while not going out of your way to put yourself in danger. After that, Cobra Kai was more about Johnny Lawrence being sort of the anti-hero, going out and finding students and teaching them respect, and then Miyagi-Do kind of warring with Cobra Kai. And that was an interesting thing. And then you have everyone teaming up, but you still have to have a quota of fights. That's the thing I don't really like about this season, is that it just feels like there's a quota of fights, because that scene at their fraternity I thought was very irresponsible, as I said, for 2 reasons. One, it glorifies underage drinking, which I don't think is a good idea. This show does have some good things going for it. It does have some positive messages for kids, especially kids who would like this kind of show. But just going out and showing that, yeah, if you go to a party, it might be full of losers, but it's not, the underage drinking is not the problem. The irresponsible party going is not the problem. It's just those jerks at the party. It's like, no, you really shouldn't be going out and getting trashed at frat parties when you're not even old enough to go to the college. Actually, it's kind of I don't want to keep using the word irresponsible, but it's not a thing that I think they should really be showing in the show with no consequences, And sometimes they do show consequences in the show, and it has a great humor side to it. Like, they had that one party where everyone was going out and drinking, and of course you showed Samantha there kind of going off of her element and getting drunk, and everyone was kind of feeling bad for her, and it was portrayed as a bad thing there. And then the cops got called on the party, and everyone was running away and stuff. And I thought that was a good way to showcase that, and I thought that was using both a mixture of, you know, humor and serious moments to show that that wasn't a very responsible thing to do. Here it just shows that, like, the people who were going out drinking, they're cool people. And the reason I say that is because, yes, the guys who were running the party were jerks, but at the same time, after they were dealt with, then it's like, oh yeah, just come join this other frat. You know, I don't think that's a really good thing to do. And these kids are probably like 17, so showing them just going out and just, you know, chugging a bunch of alcohol. I mean, in addition to, you know, the safety concerns with just how kids are in danger at parties from people who might take advantage of them, there's also the thing of binge drinking and alcohol poisoning. And it's just, I don't know, it just kind of went off the rails there. So I have to give it a thumbs down for that. Now, if this was a show that was primarily geared toward adults, and everyone watching this should understand that, of course, you know, everyone, you know, not everyone, but a lot of us had adventures, you know, as teenagers, did things we regret now, took risks we shouldn't have taken. Like, if it was a show primarily, you know, consumed by adults and that was the messaging there, that's fine, I think. A lot of things geared towards adults have those kinds of nostalgic scenes in them. But since this is a show watched by so many kids, as in, you know, people who are in middle school and high school as an audience watching this show, I don't think that's a good thing to put in the show. So I'll say that. And the other thing is, I'm really tired of the scenes where you just kick someone's butt and then everything goes back to normal. I mean, aside from the fact that people hold grudges and oftentimes will come at you with more than fists if you do things like this, which is something that is touched on a little bit in the show, which Daniel's saying, like, you think those guys are just going to, not Daniel, sorry, with Johnny saying, you think these guys are just going to let this go, now they're going to come after you. Like, there's that. It dealt with it a little bit, but not nearly as much, right? Like, I am starting to be a little bit concerned about the messaging of the show with the violence. Because on the one hand, it shows that, you know, violence isn't the answer. Violence is for self-defense only, and you should seek to make peace with your enemies. But at the same time, the show is starting to muddle its messaging because Daniel and Johnny are starting to learn from each other's styles, which is fine. You know, because sometimes the way of the fist, sometimes striking first, it works in life for some things, but I don't really think that's a violence thing. I think sometimes, you know, when it comes to striking first, I think the show has done a good job of showing sometimes you can't just sit back and be passive and wait for everything. Sometimes you got to go out and try to get things. But when you literally say, you know, sometimes going out and just beating people up is a way to solve things. I mean, I know it's a comedy show, but again, like, if this is something that's made primarily for adults, that's fine. But you got to be really careful with the messaging when you're showing content to kids. You know, you got to be really careful of that. Because when you're young like that, you know, that instinct to go out and just fight, it's very strong in teenagers sometimes. And what I see in a lot of these fighting scenes is two things. The first thing is that there are no consequences socially most of the time. You know, people don't usually get charges pressed against them unless they're adults who are supervillains like Terry Silver, or the kids working with Cobra Kai like in season 3 when they had the home break-in, right? So those people get consequences and get put on probation and stuff. But the people who beat up the people who were being really, you know, real jerks, you know, those guys don't tend to get consequences. And the second thing is, there tend to be, like, no physical consequences unless you count, like, Miguel getting kicked off of the platform. So, like, you know, it's like only if you take it too far and kick someone off of a rail will there be physical consequences. And it's like, no, I don't agree with that. And I can see the people dissenting to what I'm saying and say, oh, no, there are social consequences. People get arrested and there are physical consequences. Like, look what happened to Miguel. Like, that's true. But, like, when you kick someone in the ribs, like, if you give someone a good shoe kick to the ribs when they're down and you crack one of their ribs, that can, like, permanently damage someone's lungs. If you kick someone in the head, that can give them a concussion that they might not ever recover from. And if you punch someone in the face at the right angle, you might break their nose and they'll look different for the rest of their lives, or you might, you know, bash their eye and give them an eye injury that might make them go blind in that eye or detach their retina. I'm just saying, like, these are things that most people know, but, and I know that this is not a realistic fighting show. I know that this is not a thing that happened, but the thing is, I don't accept the argument that, showing realism in a show about fighting means that you have to have a medical diagram there and have an old man on camera waggling his finger and saying, no, no, no. You don't have to do all that. The kind of thing that happened to Miguel is fine. The kind of thing, where you show Tori punching that statue and breaking part of her hand, that's all you need. Having a party scene where it's funny and people, have the cops called on them, and then, a couple of the kids can't go to college after. That's all you need. You need more stuff like that. You don't have to sit there and have a PSA with Ronald Reagan sitting in front of the camera going, now kids, remember, don't do drugs, don't fight in school. You don't need that. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying there needs to be a bit more show of consequences if you're going to do things like that. Have a fight in the show where, someone like Daniel LaRusso was telling someone, hey, you really need to avoid this fight. And the kids are thinking, oh, no, it's going to be fine. And then they just have a normal fight and everyone's laughing and having a good time. And then someone gets their rib cracked and ends up in the hospital. And it's like a thing where, they could have died. Like something like that. I think you need to have something like that on the show. This is a show that does drama great, I think you can do something like that. Because it's just, I think a lot of people don't understand how dangerous fighting actually is, how stupid fighting is, and how much it should be a last resort because it tends to not solve anything. One thing I find interesting about this show is it's ironic because they have to keep pumping out seasons of this show, so they have to keep finding new things to fight about in the show. But, when you take a step back and look at this really, you realize that it's like fighting solves the problem. Well, these people have been fighting now for 6 seasons. What's the resolution? What are you going to do after the fists fly? When's the peacetime? When do you have what you want? Because if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of people walking around life who never have to throw punches to get peace. I'm not saying that there aren't people who are antagonized and they have to use violence to defend themselves. I'm not saying there aren't people like that who live that kind of life, and I feel very bad for those people, and I'm pretty sure everyone at some point in their life has had an encounter like that, especially in school with bullies where someone was coming after you and the teachers were saying, oh, no, don't throw a punch, don't do this, don't do that. Well, maybe you had to get yourself out of a situation. So I'm not talking about that, but what I am saying is that a lot of people who don't approach life aggressively end up with better results. That we had this episode where Johnny Lawrence didn't beat up that guy from the real estate office, but at the same time, the show is muddling its messages because it also seems to be saying that sometimes it is the answer. So it's like we've sort of lost that. And I like the complex villain. I like the anti-hero. I like the anti-hero who becomes the actual hero. I like that Johnny Lawrence story arc. I like that kind of thing in shows. But let's not forget that Mr. Miyagi still had the high ground. Let's not forget that Mr. Miyagi still had the best karate. Mr. Miyagi still had the best outlook on life. I'm glad that we're kind of coalescing around Miyagi-Do this season, but I think this show has also muddled its message. I think a lot of shows and a lot of movies, and this is something that's been pointed out too, is just I think in an effort to show the complexity of the villain, we've sort of lost the importance of the unambiguous hero. We need to have a hero. We need to have a hero in the show that, yes, makes mistakes, and yes, has flaws, and yes, sometimes screws up, but still comes out on top as the person that you want to emulate because they have that strong moral fiber and they don't deviate from it when they are very, very pressed, and they always come back from it, even if they thought about deviating from it. And even if they did a little bit, they always come back from it and realize the error of their ways, of that hero figure who teaches you how to live your life. Not the hero who says, you know what, sometimes rushing into a situation and just using your fists is fine. Because, I know it's a TV show, but Chosen and Johnny went and picked a fight with Silver, and it was shown as heroic when they didn't have to go do that. This is an all-valley karate tournament. And they're talking about Saikai Taikai. Oh, the Cobra Kai is going to take over the world. Chosen could have easily died in that. And I don't like in this show that when someone almost dies and they come back, they're fine. Miguel, realistically, in the show, should probably have had irreversible consequences. Even if they didn't do the whole thing where it's like, oh, Miguel's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life or something like even if they weren't going to do something like that, they should have showed him, like, maybe he had some sort of problem where he can't fight with his left hand now, for the rest of his life. Or maybe, it's causing some sort of problem in school because occasionally he has these pains that just don't go away and it might affect his ability to do karate. Like, it's not like that, another thing is you don't want disability to just be this thing that completely stops people. You don't want to portray disability as being this, like, thing that just completely stops people dead in their track and they can never overcome it. But at the same time, you want to show that maybe these things do have consequences, So that's my issue with that. Okay, I've talked forever about the morality of that. Let's actually move on to the rest of the episode. So, something else in this episode. Master Kim? I don't remember the rest of his name. That guy's still alive. When he turned around, I was like, whoa. It's been 40 years, so what is he, like, over 100 now? He must have been at least, like, 50 or 60 something at the time, so he's like 90 or 100 because it was in the 80s. It was like 1984 when it was the first movie, I think. So with Terry Silver. By the way, I have to compliment young Silver and young Kreese. Those actors are so good. I'm glad that they're not doing deep fakes for those actors. I respect the hustle of not having a deep fake and actually having actors that might not look the part, but they just act the part. Because the guy who's playing young Silver, he's acting just like Silver. And it's so good, He doesn't look exactly like him, but that smile and the way he shakes his head and the ponytails going back and forth, like his mannerisms, he's really got that down. The guy who plays Kreese, less so. He doesn't look quite as good as Silver does with his performance. But you know what? He's still got it down, I think. I think he still is doing well enough there for that. And I like that thing. The scene with the grandfather and the little girl, surprisingly brutal scene, and I thought it really showed the way that they operate in that dojo, and I really like that scene. Again, the side quest with Kreese, it's very Mortal Kombat Annihilation, It's very, like, movie number 3 in a franchise, And ironically, movie 3, I was talking about Daniel LaRusso being the hero earlier. I meant to touch on this point. Even Karate Kid Part 3, even all the mistakes I think Karate Kid Part 3 made, revealing in the beginning that Terry Silver is the villain, I think was the biggest mistake that film made. I think that was completely unnecessary for them to make that reveal and for the film to lose a lot of its tension and ambiguity right in the beginning there. But, Daniel LaRusso, in that movie, speaking of the hero thing, he did join Cobra Kai for a while and then realized the error of his ways. Now, he kind of realized the error of his ways partially with the help of John Kreese jumping out and going, rah! But I respect that in that film, when he realized he made a mistake, he was already going there to tell them no. He made that realization on his own. He didn't have to have something completely tragic happen for him to realize or for them to do the villain reveal. He punched that guy in the face, and Terry Silver was trying to show him, no, you did the right thing, Danny boy. You reacted right away. That's what you need. And then Daniel went to Mr. Miyagi and said, I don't like that version of myself. And he went back to them, and then that's when they unleashed everything. And yes, you got Mike Barnes in that movie being able to teleport, and you got Daniel on his really stupid quest to go find the bonsai tree that Mr. Miyagi told him not to find. Like it's this whole ridiculous thing. It's so stupid. Some of the things that happen in the film, but throughout all of that, Daniel LaRusso was still the hero, and he's still, and him and Mr. Miyagi butt heads more in that film than any of the other films. And he wanted to join the tournament to keep his name up, and Mr. Miyagi was shown to be right, and at the same time, you had that thing with him joining Cobra Kai and Mr. Miyagi. So, like, the complex writing, ironically, in number 3 was pretty good, with Daniel being the hero in that story, and I think we need to get more back to that. I think the show has been very focused on Johnny, which is good. I think the show has been very focused on people like Chosen and the kids, but I still think maybe it's time in this season for Daniel LaRusso. Daniel LaRusso's going to fight. I think it's time for Daniel LaRusso to maybe rise up as more of the hero. I think Daniel LaRusso of the adults, maybe it's time for him to be the lead guy. Even though the show is called Cobra Kai, maybe this is Daniel's moment. Maybe this is time for Daniel to show, he knows what he's talking about too. Daniel hasn't gotten in very many good fights in the show, honestly. There's been a couple times, where him and Johnny have fought before, and then there's also a thing where he went and beat up those guys for no reason, part of the problem with Daniel being the hero, and then sort of catering to Johnny's way of thinking, so he went and beat up those guys at the hockey match for no reason. There were no consequences for him at all. He did have a good fight with Terry Silver. I will give you that. He did have a good fight with Silver in there. But I want Daniel to really be like, okay, there's a reason why this guy was the All Valley champ. I think we should get back to more of that. By the way, I respect the show also for not having Silver return in the first episode. I have not watched any of the trailers. I am not going to watch anything else. I'm not going to talk to anyone else about the show before I have these reviews. So I don't know if Silver's coming back. If I had to guess, if I had to place my guess, I would say that at the very end, what they're going to do at the last minute is have Silver come back, and that's going to be the end of episode 5, is the return of Silver. He's going to break out of prison, or he's going to have someone pull something. This is Terry Silver, right? Terry Silver is basically a supervillain. I made a joke last season that I was just waiting for him to destroy Miyagi-Do with his laser vision, right? Like, Mike Barnes was able to teleport when he was working with Terry Silver. I mean, this guy, man, he's unstoppable. So they're not going to be able to get him in the prison system. But anyway, so that's what's happening with Cobra Kai. Anything else? I like Dimitri and Hawk and Miguel, and I think those characters are still really good characters. I like the stuff going on with Kyler too. I like that he's kind of more of a protagonist now, so that's pretty cool. Again, I just don't like all that frat boy stuff. I don't like that. I like the Hawk having the cups on his mohawk. It is just like, yeah, But anyway, we will see what happens later in the season. I liked episode 2. I'm excited for the ride. That's a little bit of a downer, the episode 2, but honestly, the stuff of the show, I'm more used to it. And I'm watching this as an adult. I know the show is not telling kids to go out and drink a bunch of... It's just, I'm a little bit worried about the messaging. But anyway, I'm not going to let that detract from my enjoyment of the show. Let's move on to episode 3, see how it is. In the meantime, guys, thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.